All right. Welcome back to the Copywriters podcast with your host, the world's greatest copywriting coach, David Garfinkel. David, how you doing today, man?
Nathan, I'm good. How are you?
I'm fantastic. And it looks like you rounded up a pretty awesome surprise for the listeners today. So I'm gonna hand it over to you, chill, and absorb as much information as I can today.
Okay. And, just for our YouTube listeners, your new lighting setup really puts me to shame. So I'm going to be very ashamed as I go through today's show.
Oh, no. Okay.
No, I'm kidding, but it does look great. It really does. It looks fantastic.
Thank you. We're going to have to do something for you pretty soon.
I know. Coming into the post-Zoom age or something. All right. So let's get to our show. Our guest today, I'm very happy to have him. He has taken his copywriting knowledge over to the paid content platform, Patreon, and he's the first person I've heard about doing this. Eddie Shleyner. Is it Shleyner? It is Shleyner.
Yeah, you got it. Yeah,
Thank you. Eddie Shleyner, I've only known by Eddie before, started out writing copy for some large business websites. Meanwhile, he kept some notes to himself as he was figuring out copywriting on the job training and, succeeding at it. But he really wrote out some detailed instructions. One thing led to another. There have been some pretty interesting developments. You'll hear about them today. But first, hear this. Copywriting is powerful. You're responsible for how you use what you hear on this podcast. And most of the time, common sense is all you need. So if you make extreme claims or if you're writing copy for offers in highly regulated industries like health and finance, and business opportunity, you may want to get a legal review after you write and before you start using your copy. My larger clients do this all the time. So Eddie, welcome and thanks for being here.
Hey, thank you guys. Yeah, I've been a huge fan of the show, so I appreciate you calling me on.
Well, great. So let's get right into it. We've got a lot to cover. You've taken a different approach to copywriting from anyone else I've come across. Before we get into your history in just a minute, could you tell us something about the results you're getting today in terms of clients and income?
Yeah. So about my approach, I guess, I was teaching myself copywriting and marketing, and I figured if I could, explain a copywriting or marketing principle in a clear and concise and entertaining way, then I was ready to use it, in my own work, in my own promotions. And I did this for a while privately. I would just, write these articles in a running Google Doc, and then eventually I figured, why not publish them on a blog, make them public and, I guess create a feedback loop. Because feedback is something I didn't really have. I didn't really know if the way I was, explaining these principles was actually helpful to people. So I made them public, and that's really how verygoodcopy.com started. It was a way for me to, document my education as a copywriter and marketer while also practicing my writing. And so I did that for a while, but I'll admit I wasn't very consistent at first. Sometimes I'd write a couple articles a week, and then sometimes, I wouldn't write for a month at a time. So I wasn't very disciplined when it came to my creative schedule. And the consistency, I think, kicked in about 3 years ago when I became the copy chief at G2.com, which is basically like a Yelp, but for software. Plus a few other things in my life, I guess, inspired me to produce more and try to grow the newsletter as much as possible. And, now the Very Good Copy list is, over 20,000 email subscribers and growing at a healthy clip. So I've since left G2 to dedicate, my time to growing VGC and VGC Plus, which, like you mentioned, is my monthly copywriting course subscription on Patreon. Thank you very much. And that's where we are now, and in terms of clients and income, I think that's all going well because of, I guess, the credibility that I've created through Very Good Copy and through educating others about, copywriting and marketing and creative thinking.
Oh, well, that's interesting and impressive. And, most people would start out a copywriting career writing sales copy for free or with an agency job or maybe hanging out in one of the online copywriting groups, going to seminars. You have a different career path, though. Could you share the highlights of how you got to this point where you're doing the Patreon thing and the free email list?
Oh, sure. So, yeah, basically, I was an English major in college. I studied literature and narrative writing, and advertising and marketing wasn't really on my radar. In fact, I didn't know what copywriting was. When I graduated from school, all I knew was that I wanted to write for a living, but I didn't really know where to start. So I got an inside sales job for a year, um, which I really didn't like because again, I just wanted to write for work. So after a year, I left and got work writing job ads for Career Builder, which is a pretty big job board where companies buy space to advertise open roles and positions. And my responsibility was to take those ads and make them as compelling and appealing as possible for the right audience, the right candidates. So I quickly realized that my worth in that role was dependent on how often I could get a candidate to click apply and take action. So I didn't know it when I accepted the position, but I came to realize that I was doing something called direct response copywriting. And when I found that out, I became fairly obsessed with learning everything I could about the craft. Because to me, it was like a godsend. Suddenly I was aware of a writing discipline that paid well, so I could make a living doing what I love to do. And that's where my education started. Back then I didn't have a personal mentor per se. Instead, I would just read books and blogs and listen to podcasts about copywriting and marketing. And when I came across a valuable principle or technique, I would challenge myself to write about it in a way that teaches it to others. And that's where, like I said, Very Good Copy started. It was just me, documenting what I learned.
Okay, so what you're describing is really a self-determined path. You didn't exactly have, a proven model to follow like a lot of us have done. What mistakes did you make, and what did you learn from them?
Well, I think the biggest mistake I made was not sharing my work sooner, because like I said, I was documenting my education for a while before I started putting articles online. And I think I just assumed that because I wasn't yet an expert, that my voice and perspective wouldn't be valuable to other people. And even after, I bought the Very Good Copy domain and started publishing, I still wasn't convinced that the work was of any value to people. So for a while, I wasn't even collecting email addresses for the newsletter. It was only after I did a guest post for the HubSpot marketing blog, which had a backlink to Very Good Copy. And literally dozens of people filled my contact form, asking where they could sign up for the newsletter. And so I thought, man, maybe I should do that. So I created a MailChimp account that day and added a newsletter form fill to VGC that day. And then the next time I published on HubSpot, over 1,000 people hit my site, and almost 200 of those people signed up for the newsletter. And that's when I thought, I probably had something and had probably missed out on some opportunities, to convert visitors into subscribers. Actually, years later, I found a quote by a designer named Mike Monteiro, and he said, "The secret to being good at anything is to approach it like a curious idiot rather than a know-it-all genius." I love that quote, and it made me realize that a lot of people put pressure on themselves to, know a subject matter inside and out before they try to teach it to people. And I think that makes sense if you're a doctor, probably, and your influence can literally affect, someone's health and safety. But if you're a creative person, if you're writing and designing, I'm not sure you need to necessarily be a world-class practitioner at your craft to share information that's helpful or, inspiring to people. I think you just need to be curious and write as you learn. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I guess I wish I'd known that earlier in my journey, because it would have, first of all, taken some of the pressure off. And then ultimately, I probably would have grown and developed faster had I had that perspective.
Yeah, that's a good point. I guess maybe people who are learning something, if you're a, a good writer, which you obviously are, and good storyteller, good explainer, good trail guide, maybe, scout. There's interested in learning about your journey and your thoughts and your discoveries. It makes them feel okay that they're having the same doubts or the same discoveries, or they still don't know how to do something. I mean, I really like that. But let's look on the other side. What were the things you tried that worked out well?
Well, I think from the get-go, I had committed to a micro format, and this ended up becoming really effective for me, not only in a way to differentiate the content on Very Good Copy, but also to kind of streamline the production of that content. So, for example, I started with what I call micro articles, which I basically bill as clear, concise articles designed to teach one persuasion principle or technique at a time. And then I started creating micro interviews, which are basically written interviews with other creative pros, so copywriters and marketers and designers, asking them the same 6 questions, which are: 1, what's your work routine? And 2, what do you know now about your work that you wish you'd known when you first started? And 3, what did your biggest professional failure teach you? And 4, the number one thing that's helped you shorten your craft's learning curve. And then 5 was, what book has helped you the most over your career? And finally, what's your parting piece of advice? So every interviewee answers the same 6 questions, which turned out to be a pretty efficient way to conduct written interviews, at least. And then I also created, these micro courses and micro series. And micro courses are akin, I guess, to very long, rich, detailed articles about a specific copywriting principle. So, for example, I have one micro course teaching you how to write fascinations, which are basically sentences designed to evoke curiosity in the reader and make you click through and make you take action. And if you go to verygoodcopy.com right now, you can get access to that immediately. You just look in the main nav under micro courses. And then I have another course called Conversion Class, where I tear down basically every persuasion principle and technique I use on Very Good Copy. And that was born after I launched on Product Hunt and converted 21% of the visitors from that launch into subscribers. So I figured that would make, a pretty compelling course. And it's actually my most popular one to date. And, if you subscribe, you can get that one in your first newsletter. And yeah, so every micro series is basically a collection of articles, about the same theme or around the same subject or author. So long story short, by rooting Very Good Copy content in this micro format, I not only made it easy for myself to create content, but I made it easy for people to consume it because, they knew what to expect. And I think knowing what to expect, decreases the cognitive load and basically makes things easier to consume and understand. So I think one of the best things I did was create a consistent, repeatable format that's now become pretty synonymous with the brand.
Yeah, that's good. I think you either stumbled upon or researched or figured out what a lot of businesses take a long time to understand, which is, something reliable and consistent builds a lot of trust and faith in the business.
Yeah, exactly.
So you have 20,000 subscribers to your email newsletter, which is not the world's biggest list, but for a copywriting list, that's pretty damn good. I'd say more than a lot of online businesses have. What would you say from a content creation point of view are the most important things you did that build up your subscriber base?
Yeah, so from a content creation standpoint, the micro articles definitely made that connection with readers early on. Before the interviews, before the courses and series, the articles are what I built an audience on, I think. And each article is really a combination of 3 things. So there's a story or an anecdote. There's a lesson about copywriting or marketing or creativity. And then there's a standard length. So in other words, almost every micro article starts with an experience I had an anecdote I heard, a show I watched, a book I read, and it usually has nothing to do with copywriting or marketing or creativity. It's just an arbitrary story that I've come into some way, somehow, just living my life. But because I'm a student of copywriting and marketing, what usually happens is I come across a story and I automatically see a bridge or a parallel between that story, that anecdote, that experience, and a copywriting or marketing or creativity technique or principle I can teach. So once I have the story and I have the lesson, now the work boils down to telling that story and teaching that lesson in about 220, 225 words, because that's how long micro articles are. And when I put that story, that lesson, and that length together, I end up with my first draft. And then I'll usually edit that draft, dozens of times before I think it's ready to go. But that's the basic process that I use is I look for those three things. And when I put those three things together, I just keep on rewriting.
Well, that's fascinating and very, very valuable for anyone else who's wanting to do content. Can you give us an example, specific one?
Yeah, of course. For example, for as long as I can remember, I've been plagued by this feeling of dread or insecurity or hopelessness, I guess, leading up to a copywriting breakthrough or a creative breakthrough. If I'm stuck, searching for a big idea for a campaign, or if I'm stuck working on an article, or if I'm stuck, trying to even design a GIF for a post, basically, if I'm stuck, I feel as though, I'm never going to get unstuck. And that to me has always been a very lonely feeling. Because I know ultimately it's my responsibility and my responsibility alone to find a solution to that problem. And I've always referred to this feeling as creative loneliness. So a few weeks ago, I rewatched a documentary called 6 Days to Air, which is all about South Park's production schedule, which is insane. And basically each episode of South Park is created in just 6 days. And they do that so that the storylines can be, current and topical. And so the documentary follows the co-creators, Trey Parker and Matt Stone, and their team through the process. And there's this one scene where Trey, who's the lead writer on the show, gets a McDonald's delivery. And the documentary producer behind the camera asks Trey how McDonald's affects his creativity, and Trey says that it doesn't. He says it just makes him happy. And then he explains how much he hates writing because it's such a sad and difficult process, knowing that everyone's waiting on him, and he's struggling to get the work as good as it can be. And he goes, I just hate it so much, and McDonald's just makes it better. And I'm watching this and thinking, geez, I know that feeling. That's creative loneliness, in a nutshell. So instantly I realized, this is a great story to introduce that concept in a way that normalizes it. Because if somebody as accomplished as Trey Parker feels it, right, then we can all feel it. And so, there's an example of me, taking a story I found in the wild, the story of Trey and his McDonald's, and connecting it to a lesson about creative thinking. And I think when I wrote it, my first draft was about 400 words. So I knew I had to cut that down by about 180 for it to fit into the format. And so that's when that editing process begins, right? It really just boils down to me going through the copy and asking myself, where can I eliminate words but still retain the message? Or, can I replace these 3 words with 1 word? Or can I connect these 2 sentences? And so after I have the story and the lesson put together, it's really an exercise in concision, right? Which is actually, I like a lot more than the writing part. I think staring at a blank or incomplete page is a lot more daunting than paring a page down, at least for me.
Yeah. Any chance we could get you to read that?
Oh yeah. Hold on, let me pull it up. Okay, Creative Loneliness. This is the title. Creative Loneliness is Real. I just rewatched 6 Days to Air. It's a documentary about South Park's production schedule, which is the most grueling in broadcast TV. Each episode is written, recorded, animated, and delivered in just 6 days. Trey Parker created South Park. Matt Stone, the co-creator, called Trey the chef, the force behind the show's success. In a scene from the documentary, Trey's in his office eating McDonald's. How does McDonald's affect your creativity? The producer asked. Trey took a bite. It doesn't. He wiped his mouth with his hand. It just makes me happy for like 5 minutes. He reached for his Coke. I hate writing so much because the writing part of it is actually so lonely and sad because I know everyone's waiting for me to get it done. And just like that battle of fighting over lines and trying to figure out what's the best way to say things, he took a sip. I just hate it so much. And McDonald's is just a little bit of sunshine. Creative loneliness is that feeling of dread or insecurity or hopelessness leading up to a breakthrough. And if an Oscar-nominated, Tony-winning, Grammy-winning genius like Trey Parker feels it, we can all feel it. It's real and it's normal too. And that's a micro article. So that's 200 words.
That's awesome, man. You took me there. I love it. That's really good. Well, let's talk just for a few minutes about your subscription service. For copywriters on Patreon, the Very Good Copy Plus, I think it's called, right?
Sure, yeah. So, I launched VGC Plus last year in November on Patreon, which, like you said, is a subscription platform for creators. And initially, my thought was to publish about 3 pieces of content per week. So I was publishing, articles and series and videos and podcasts. Just a ton of content that wasn't accessible to anyone unless they were VGC Plus members. And obviously at the end of the month, a few people would churn and discontinue their membership. Not a lot, thankfully, but of those who did, the majority had basically the same feedback in their exit surveys, which was, there's too much content to consume. And at first this didn't make sense. I figured more is always better. But as the trend continued, I realized that what people want is less content and that's more transformational. So in other words, people want to sink their teeth into a principle or concept or technique in a way that they'll never forget. And I think the fact is that, this takes time and effort, right? It takes time to digest information and it takes effort to apply that information and actually use it and benefit from it. And I think if you have too much coming at you, it becomes very overwhelming and your experience suffers. So I decided to pivot away from 12 pieces of content per month and just do 1 piece of content per month. And that 1 piece is a video micro course. So both familiar to my audience and novel at the same time because I don't really make videos outside of VGC Plus. So on the first of each month, I post a new course. And on the last day of each month, I take it down and sell it a la carte for premium. And then it's replaced the next day with a new course and the cycle kind of repeats itself. And the subscription is only $10. And, that gets you the course each month as well as, access to all of the other content that was there, dozens of articles and series and podcasts and videos from before the pivot. So that's Plus in a nutshell.
That's awesome. I think we're close to our time limit, and I'm so happy with what you gave us. I really appreciate it. Nathan, do you have any follow-up or questions?
I just want to commend you on creating an awesome business model. I think one of the things that I've learned in my copywriting experience is that it's better to be selling your own stuff than constantly be looking for new clients. And I think that what you've done is something that copywriters out there who are on the roller coaster of client and client acquisition and feast and famine, looking at what you did and maybe studying and seeing if they could implement a little bit of that is what my main takeaway from this episode would be. If I could recommend people get a message out of it.
Yeah, great point. Congrats on doing something very bold and maybe a little scary, Eddie. I mean, I think
I appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Where is the best place for people to go if they want to check out more of your work or maybe join what you've got going on?
Yeah, folks can go to verygoodcopy.com and that's basically home base. they'll be able to find links to subscribe there and links to Plus there and links to contact me there. So I'd say verygoodcopy.com is the place to go.
Eddie, thank you for coming on. David, thank you for putting this together. And for a sneak preview, what do we got coming up next week on the podcast?
Well, we've got an old masters series with two old masters that are not even from copywriting, but very much apply.
Nice. All right. And until then, make sure that you're subscribed to this podcast over at copywriterspodcast.com, and we will catch you later.
Catch you later.
Thanks.